Hi, today we're going to talk about how to write a haiku. There are many different types of poems out there, many different forms, but a haiku is a short, fun way to get students involved in the poetry writing process. So, let's start with the definition of a haiku. A haiku is defined as a form of Japanese verse composed of 17 syllables total, divided into lines of 3 with 5, 7, and 5 syllables, and often dealing with the topic of nature. So, what we need to do is make sure that we understand exactly how syllables are broken up. For some people, they haven't really studied syllables for a long time, so what we're going to do is kind of just have a mini session. Since the haiku really focuses on nature, the words that were chosen have to do with nature. So, if you look at the first set, you have words such as tree and grass. When you look at tree and grass, those only have one syllable. So, those are nature related. And you look at forest and branches. Forest, branches, those have 2 syllables. And then you move up to 3. Mosquito and cardinal, 3. So when you're looking at creating a haiku, you need to make sure that your first line has 5 syllables total. Your second line has 7 total. And then your third line goes back to 5. That would make it an accurate haiku. So, without that, you wouldn't have a haiku. You would maybe have a great poem, but it wouldn't be considered a haiku. Let's look at this example of something that doesn't quite meet the requirements. In the garden, this first line only has 4 syllables. So this would not meet the first line requirement for a haiku. The second line, he dances, that only has 3. And our third line, with the butterflies, has 5. So if you look at the numbers here for syllables, you only have 4, 3, and 5, which you need to have 5, 7, and 5. So although this does have to do with nature, this doesn't really meet the format requirement. Now let's look at a couple of other examples and see how these actually meet the requirements. We're looking at a nature haiku. Rippling like water has 5. Brilliant colors of rainbows has 7. And the butterflies dance has 5. So if you look at this haiku, it is nature related, and it also has the requirements for the format. 5 syllables on the first line, 7 on the second, and 5 on the third. Let's look at our second example. Wind blowing softly. If you look, that has 5 syllables. So we can move that here. Tree branches swaying in wind. That has 7. So that would also meet the requirements for the second line of a haiku. And last, leaves begin to drift. That has 5. So that would also meet the requirements for the haiku. This is nature related, and it has the 3 lines that work. A haiku can also be written about other topics, but most of the time it's written about nature. I like to have my students just kind of experiment with things that they like to talk about or things they like to write about. So, for example, if we're going to talk about love, which if we're teaching high school, a lot of teenagers want to talk about that. So, what do you think about when you're writing your own haiku? What kinds of things do you need to start brainstorming about, writing about? Well, there are 3 things that I like to have my students talk about. Imagery, connotation, and sensory details. Connotation, we come to understand, has to do with the personal connection that students make. So that's where I like to start, because I want students to think about what's important to them. What do they have a connection with? And then, once they decide on what that might be and what's important to them, then they can think about imagery and sensory details. They need to start thinking about how they feel personally, what they see when they think about that certain topic, what they hear, what they smell. All of those things come into the picture. So, for example, let's write our own. If we're talking about love, which, let's change this, then let's go ahead and make sure that we're talking about 5, 7, and 5, even though our topic may have changed. So, this first one, love's only weakness. If you look, that has 5 syllables. So that meets the first line requirement. Second, is also its greatest strength. That has 7. And last, it defies reason. That line has 5 syllables. So even though we've changed the topic, we still have a format that can work for our students. And these are very short, abstract poems that students are able to write and still leave the reader up to interpreting themselves. So 575 is our format for the haiku. Students can write them quickly and easily, and they can get a lot out of them, and they can still be meaningful poems to them. So, haiku.